Hello, me again. I started this YouTube channel in, I think, June or July of 2022, and I told myself I'd be doing regular uploads about sort of photography content and stuff like that, but it's now December, and this is my second YouTube video. So yeah, that went well. As you can sort of tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be chatting to you about films today. I realise I'm just going to use this YouTube channel as like an opportunity to just chat about stuff I'm passionate about, make creative videos. I think I might try and regularly chat about movies because I just love doing that. So that could be a regular sort of format on here, but considering it took me 6 months to make my second YouTube video, don't get your hopes up. But yeah, without further ado, let's chat about films. Almost 3 years into the roaring 2020s, and I'd say that so far it's been a pretty brilliant decade for movies. Looking at the release calendar for 2023 as well, I'd say that trend is pretty much going to continue all the way through. There are so many talented directors that are making interesting movies and utilising the medium to its fullest potential, and it's really just inspiring for young creators like myself. As of filming this video, in 2022 I saw 60 movies released in the UK in the year 2022. Bit of a mouthful that, but the majority of these I saw in the cinema, and there were a few sort of streaming service exclusives, but I will also count those as part of my list because they were technically released in the year 2022. And going into the year, I had predictions for what my top 10 might have looked like because there were certain filmmakers who were releasing movies I was just highly anticipated for. New films from Paul Thomas Anderson, Damien Chazelle, Jordan Peele, Robert Eggers all had me really eager to get to the cinema. But it's kind of truly hard to really know how much you're going to resonate with a movie. Like, just because your favourite director is making it doesn't mean immediately it's going to be the best film you've seen that year. And I found that some films just completely snuck up on me. Some films I didn't even know about going into the year just became some of my favourites because they really resonated with me and they were so well made, and I hadn't even heard of the director before. And I think that's just the beauty of films in 2022. There's been so many really great ones, and I look forward to sort of talking to you guys about it. But before showing you my top 10, it's worth mentioning some of the reasons that a film might be regarded as one of my favourites of the year. It's all subjective, of course, but it's mostly come down to a few factors. One being the ideas and themes that are core to the story being told, like how much those ideas actually align with what I find interesting and what I'm passionate about at the time. Two, the actual technical filmmaking prowess on display, like how well was the movie photographed, scored, directed, edited, acted, like all those technical elements, how well were they executed, how impressed was I by the actual filmmaking on display. The pure enjoyment factor as well, like how much are you actually just going to enjoy the film is really important, how immersed I was in the story, and how much it resonated with me as a person, like where I am in my life, how much does the story resonate and how much can I relate to it. Often can bump a film up on my sort of ranking list because it just means a bit more to me as a person. So before we actually go into the full sort of top 10 list, it's worth sort of mentioning some honourable mentions because this film, the films this year have just been brilliant, really. And there's so many that I really liked that I can't squeeze them all into a top 10. So I thought I'd have a few honourable mentions to discuss as well before we go into my top 10 favourites of the year. Without further ado, let's go into the first honourable mention. Over the last few years, Park Chan-wook has become one of my favourite filmmakers. His scripts just like twist and turn in like Hitchcockian ways and make for like a really just engaging and great watch. Like Old Boy, absolute classic, mind-boggling like plot twist. I actually prefer The Handmaiden as one of his films. I think it's amazing and just so well shot. But Decision to Leave just also made for a great reminder that the way he uses camera and edits his films together really showcases talent. Like he is one of the best doing it at the moment. His film is so well shot, and I just really enjoyed it. But I didn't find the story as resonating as I would have hoped, considering how much I really liked his other films. So that's why I didn't have it in my top 10 this year. Charlotte Wells' directorial debut was really impressive, like showing a real knowledge of camera placement and abstract storytelling. Like I just really liked the way each scene was shot and sort of how the story unfolded in each scene. Whilst this one didn't really click with me as much as it did with others, by the last act and like everything, I started to actually piece everything together, and my dumbass actually realised what was going on and what story was being told. I really appreciated this film a whole lot, and it's just so worth a watch. Paul Mescal is amazing. Frankie Coro is really great in this, and if you like sort of family dramas, like it's just worth a watch just for these two alone. They're just brilliant. Arguably one of the best blockbusters of the year. Like, Tom Cruise proves he is at the forefront of edge of your seat action films. Like, what he achieved in this movie is so impressive. I don't understand. Like the shots of the dog fights and stuff like that, they did it all practically, and it blows my mind what they managed to achieve without practically no use of CGI in this film. And it just makes for some nail-biting action. Like, you can see all these sort of CGI blockbusters, which, funnily enough, there's a few later on in this video. Sometimes that sort of level of like edge of your seat, like you don't know what's going to happen next, is kind of left at the door because you just know it's all like CGI. But when you realise that they actually filmed all this practically, it just makes for even more engaging watch. Despite how strange Tom Cruise is with his Scientology and all that sort of stuff, I'm always going to champion him as someone who is leading what is best for cinema. Like, he loves films, and it's very clear that. Martin McDonagh is returning to work with Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, and it was an exciting prospect after how great his previous movie was with the both of them in Bruges. But this new film he's made is brilliant. It's beautifully photographed. It really just sort of, it's how you imagine Ireland looks and should look. I mean, I'm pretty sure they filmed it in Ireland. It was just beautifully photographed, a slow piece about two friends who one day are no longer friends, and it's just carried by two brilliant actors in Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. And this story is such a simple one, but some of the best performances of the year because it's such a slow piece that relies on these performances. And it's a great film that mirrors the backdrop of the conflicts going on at Ireland at the time, so it's just really worth a watch. Robert Eggers is seriously one of the most talented directors working today. His film, The Witch, is probably one of my all-time favourites. Like, I think it's the best horror film ever made, and it nails the sort of horror tone perfectly, considering it's his first feature film. Blows my mind. But The Northman is his latest film. It's one of the largest budget he's ever worked with, thanks to Focus Features. And in scale, it's just epic. It's a revenge tale, a Viking revenge tale, sort of helmed by Alexander Skarsgård as the lead role, and he just is badass in the role. The film just manages to capture this sort of vibe that I've never seen in any sort of like Viking sort of era film before. It really is just brilliant from Robert Eggers, what we've come to expect. I didn't like it as much as his previous work. Like, I really like The Lighthouse and The Witch. But this is still a really great film, which is just says something about Robert Eggers' catalogue. Barbarian made me pull my hair out, but in the best way possible. Like, this is how you do horror movies. I was on the edge of my seat, like completely in the dark. I had no idea what to expect. Like, some horror movies you go in, you go, oh, obviously this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And the way Zach sort of sets up the start of the film with Bill Skarsgård and makes you think that it's going to go one way, when completely halfway through the movie it completely like pulls the rug from out underneath your feet, and it turns out to be a completely different film. I love that about that. Yeah, I really enjoyed Barbarian. Without going too much into detail, you've got to watch it. So with the honourable mentions out of the way, it's time to finally get into the top 10 films of 2022. Paul Thomas Anderson, depending on what day you ask me, is maybe my favourite filmmaker of all time. It's a toss-up between him and Denis Villeneuve. They're both uniquely amazing, but I find Paul's career so interesting and amazing in the way that it's developed. I was so excited to see Licorice Pizza for the first time, as it would be the first time I'd get to see one of his films in the cinema. I got to admit, the first time I saw it, All the ingredients were there. The directorial flares such as quick whip pans, long camera takes, slow dolly zooms, the fantastic Johnny Greenwood score. These elements reminded me why I love PTA as a director, but I didn't fully resonate with the story the first time. It was like going to a restaurant you know you love, but the service was off that night. I still knew that I could gain something more from a second watch. The story being a child actor in his teens, still in school, falling in love with a 25-year-old woman, which on first viewing felt like a floaty, loosely linear narrative. The thing was though, Cooper Hoffman, son of late Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Alana Haim were both electric, and their blossoming romance felt believable to watch considering this was both their debut roles as actors. Even despite the age gap in the story, it just felt real. It wasn't until my second or third watch that Licorice Pizza truly clicked for me within the context of Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography. The floatiness I actually came to appreciate, as it really captures that sense of being lost you get in your adolescence. And whilst I didn't love this as much as like Phantom Thread for example, Licorice Pizza felt like it may have been even more true to life than his previous films, and I've come to really appreciate it now after seeing it 3 or 4 times. I really can't wait to see what PTA has up his sleeve next. This one I didn't see coming. Before 2022, I'd never seen a Jackass movie, so I was surprised to see it breach my top 10 films of the year. Jackass Forever though was one of my favourite cinema experiences pretty much all year. My jaw genuinely hurt from laughing as I left the screening. Like the day after seeing it, the first thing I did as I woke up that morning was I watched all the Jackass movies because I was just high off that sort of like adrenaline of watching these guys just pull off batshit crazy stunts. For some reason, it was what I had been missing in my life. I watched all the Jackass movies and I was just like, I just loved that sort of like pure connection that the cast had together, and some of that shock value of seeing what these guys would pull off. It's just high entertainment, like I can't lie. Forever, out of all of the Jackass movies, in my opinion, had this added level of charm though. All of them know they're getting older, yet their camaraderie seems to be ever stronger, and the stunts in this film are bigger than ever. It might be slightly telling that's the sort of person I am, that if I put a movie where someone puts a swarm of bees around their ballsack for fun over a romance movie from one of my favourite directors, but hey, you know, movies can do that. That sort of cinema experience you get of the shared, like laughing with a community of people, you can't beat it sometimes. Another film I didn't expect to be in my top 10 films of the year, but James Cameron proves why he is one of the most successful filmmakers of all time. James Cameron is one of those directors who genuinely pushes the cinematic medium in exciting directions, creating new technology to make the films he wants to. The CGI and the visuals in Way of the Water are absolutely breathtaking. Like genuinely some of the most incredible CGI I've ever seen. Like you might actually forget that it's not real life watching it. It's genuinely that impressive. I'm really glad I saw it in 3D as well, because to be honest, before watching Way of the Water, I was like, yeah, 3D is a gimmick. And to be honest, I probably still agree with that sentiment, but if James Cameron is making films for 3D, you go watch it in 3D. The second and third acts in Way of the Water were so immersive and engaging. I found that even though the main story beats were pretty much the same as the first movie, the themes of family and connection to nature were really well handled this time. Also, the movie focuses more on the Sully family as a whole and not just Jake Sully, who kind of arguably wasn't the most interesting character in the first film. The supporting cast of characters were genuinely interesting to follow. I'm really intrigued to sort of see where they take the sequels following this one with the whole like Kiri storyline. Without going into too many spoilers, she's really interesting in this film. As I've grown older, I tend to lean much more towards choosing indie dramas, and less and less do I go choose to sort of see these great big blockbuster films. Saying that, I go see anything, but I would much rather see an indie drama. This year has served as a reminder to not sleep on blockbusters when the right director is at the helm. It's easy to see the staleness when studios like Marvel are producing the same 4 movies every year. It's clear though that James Cameron is deeply passionate about filmmaking, and it shows in his advancements of the cinematic medium over the past 13 years. You can guarantee my butt will be in the seat for the next 3 Avatars. Now, one thing you need to know about me with my filmmaking sort of addiction is that I'm an absolute sucker for one-shot movies. Birdman, one of my absolute favourites. 1917, amazing. These movies use clever staging and editing to hide cuts to give the illusion of a one-shot movie, really adding to the immersion and not diverting your attention for 1 second. You're fixated on the action and what's happening in the film because you feel like you're there, you are the camera in a way. When I learned that Boiling Point was truly a one-take movie, it wasn't just like hidden cuts or anything like that, I was gobsmacked. It took like 4 to 5 attempts apparently, but still this is like really, really impressive. Stephen Graham is one of the most talented actors to come out of the UK, genuinely. He's incredibly good in this movie. The second-hand stress you get from how believable his performance is makes for a nail-biting and riveting watch. I used to work in a kitchen myself for about 6 years, and it brought back many memories of how busy shifts and the stress of a busy shift in a kitchen. So I kind of got sort of semi-PTSD from this film, but it sort of almost improved my watch, sort of being like, oh god, I remember stuff like this. So that's probably why I really enjoyed Boiling Point to an extent. The first time I saw this, I kind of felt the ending was a little bit abrupt, but in hindsight, I think it's kind of the perfect way to end the movie, really. The point of a one-shot movie is to take place in real time. If the movie is an hour and a half, that story takes place over an hour and a half. The ending to Boiling Point is a perfect culmination of the molten lava that was bubbling over for the duration of the film, finally coming to a climax, and what we are left with is raw, but works so well. This is just worth a watch purely because of Stephen Graham alone. Not the only film in this list directed by a Scandinavian director in which there is a chapter-based linear story structure. Ruben Östlund's Triangle of Sadness is one of the funniest and engaging films I've seen all year, which in my opinion really helps drill the message across of its commentary on wealth. The satirical comedy based on class and wealth disparity is fascinating and hilarious at the same time, as the premise is essentially a cluster of uber-rich people, including influencers, Russian capitalists, arms dealers, all together on this $250 million super yacht which goes awry during a storm. The divide between the upper-class yacht guests and the working-class yacht staff, interestingly, is flipped on its head by the third act, when all the luxuries afforded to them are washed away in the storm, and they have to fend for themselves on the island that they find themselves on. The second act of Triangle of Sadness is maybe my favourite sequence from a film all year. The absolute pure comedy of seeing the havoc caused by the storm, the filthy rich getting filthy, to the soundtrack of a heavy metal song. This was just built for the cinema experience, as the shared gasps and the people cringing at what they saw on screen made for all the more entertaining watch. The transition that takes the movie from Act 2 into Act 3 also just left me like gobsmacked. Harris Dickinson was particularly great in this, as he was pretty much the first on the call sheet in terms of who we follow throughout the film. Though his character isn't removed from his own privileges, he often questions the status quo and he helps the audience see from his own perspective, which I really appreciated. And it was a great way to sort of give the audience a lens into the commentary that Ruben Östlund was taking us through. Rian Johnson's Knives Out was undoubtedly one of the best films to be released in 2019. Such a smart screenplay that in my opinion made the whodunit genre fresh again. I didn't actually think that Rian could successfully pull it off for a second time, but Glass Onion ended up becoming one of my favourite films of the year. I found this film so immensely engaging as it got going. In fact, I'd say that Glass Onion is potentially funnier and more creative than Knives Out, and still even managed to feel like a wholly fresh and creative take on a murder mystery whilst not just being a complete rehash of the plot of Knives Out. Daniel Craig was born to play Benoit Blanc as much as he was born to play Bond. The Kentucky accent just suits him, and he is downright hilarious in this film. I really hope Rian Johnson makes as many movies in this series as he can without it becoming stale. Glass Onion has an impressive ensemble cast similar to its predecessor. Edward Norton going toe-to-toe with Craig was just so much fun to watch. I can't really go into this film too much without giving so much of the plot away, but just know it's a load of fun with lots of twists and turns, so it's so worth a watch. In a time where we as audiences are just overwhelmed by the superhero genre, with at least like 5 or 6 movies just cookie cut every year, it was really refreshing to see Matt Reeves take the Batman in a direction closer to David Fincher's Seven than Kevin Feige's MCU. The overall tone and setting to the Batman was perfect for a gritty detective crime thriller and suits the adaptation of the Year One series comic really well. This is partly due to the talent of Greg Fraser. He lenses the film gorgeously, using vintage lenses like the Helios 44-2, like this one, to just create frames that have character and grit to them, as opposed to super clean and bright visuals we've come to sort of see and expect from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I just really like the way he sort of dirtied up the frame and had sort of out of focus elements and used like rain on the lens and stuff like that to really just sort of create like an interesting image and just made it all the more engaging. I absolutely loved the way they introduced the Batman in this film as well, making him seem like a boogeyman, that the thugs of Gotham are afraid of him. It felt closer to a horror movie than a superhero movie, and I just remember being excited to be immersed inside this version of Gotham. When the world building is done this well and seamlessly, you as an audience member just don't want to leave. It's like Cameron with Pandora, which funnily enough, both films have essentially a 3-hour long runtime. I could sit there for another 3 hours with each personally. The central performances were as great as expected. Paul Dano is just an icon, and his Riddler was genuinely really creepy, and Pattinson's Batman was badass and just a joy to watch. His fight scenes were so well choreographed as well, and he was pretty much one of the best Bruce Waynes too, I'd say. I gotta say, the Batmobile chase scene with the Penguin was one of the most amazing sequences in a film all year. Like, it was so well shot and blocked, and by everyone involved. It had me on the edge of my seat. As a Batman story goes too, I really appreciated the journey Bruce Wayne takes in the film, starting as someone looking for vengeance to eventually become a beacon of hope for the people of Gotham. I really like that ending, and it perfectly sets Matt Reeves up to create a great sequel. What I loved most about Nope was how it balanced being epic in scale whilst also at the same time being self-contained and intimate with its characters. I think it manages to pull this off so well, partly due to the just amazing directorial vision that Peele has, with the design of the UFO as well as the script that he wrote, but also the way that Nope is shot all in IMAX so well by Hoyte van Hoytema. It's hard not to watch Nope and be in awe of the scope of its visuals. Even with the film being mostly taking place over a relatively sort of small area in like 3 locations and a relatively small central cast, I also really appreciated how the visual language is sort of established in the film too. Every time the camera pans up, you just have this ominous feeling inside yourself. And the fact that they can sort of set up a simple thing like a camera tilt to basically put you into a sense of unease is just a really great horror technique. To be able to unsettle an audience in such a simple way is really impressive filmmaking. Not only is Hoytema's influence on the film amazing, but the score by Michael Abels is just fantastic too. The climactic final act feels so intense, partly due to the score and the way the music influences the film. Daniel Kaluuya is so great at acting without even saying anything. He can say so much in just his eyes, and it's why he works so well with Peele and the horror genre. Jordan Peele has truly become an auteur in my eyes. What he tackles under the surface of Nope is really interesting. How we almost can't look away from traumatic events and create spectacle from them. It's hauntingly relevant with the war in Ukraine right now. Nope essentially suggests that if we continue to treat these things as a spectacle, it will be our downfall. This can really apply to so many elements of the world today, and it just showcases Peele's genius. The Worst Person in the World, directed by Joachim Trier, and I've probably just butchered that name completely, but he's from Norway, is one of those movies that just captures what it means to be human so well. The film follows Julie as she meanders through 4 years of her life in her 20s, trying to find a sense of her own identity as she feels lost in the world. Joachim Trier tells the story over 12 chapters in such a creative and stylish way, using the chapter structure for comedic effect sometimes, and really just playing with reality to tell the story in surrealist ways throughout the film. I feel like everyone can relate to that feeling of being lost in your own life, feeling like you don't know if you are where you're meant to be in life at a particular time, or you kind of lost that sense of identity that you feel like you might have had at one point in your life. And I just feel like that sort of feeling is so well embodied by Renate Renancev's performance, which she won Best Actress at Cannes Film Festival the year it came out for. I think it's just an amazing performance that really is the backbone of the film, as she is also the central character. A few years ago, I would often base a film's merit on whether the characters were morally sound and if their actions they made in the film made sense within my own sort of worldview. But I've come to realise that my own worldview is limited to my own experiences. So this film really acted as a reminder that characters like Julie who are flawed, make sort of wrong decisions, potentially immoral decisions, only makes them more human. And I've come to sort of appreciate films that do this a lot more now. In the final chapter, Julie chats with her ex, Askill, and it's really just heartbreaking to see that she realises life doesn't always work out the way that you think it will. It almost acts as a reminder that as much as you think you're in control of your life, there are always going to be elements that are out of your control. This movie is just really well shot as well. I'm a sucker for the vintage lens look, and it looks like it's always also shot on film, and it really gives that a nice texture and colour to it, which makes it feel even more real. Scandinavian cinema is where it's at. My favourite film of 2022. This just hit all the factors I mentioned earlier in the video completely. It's been a while since I've seen a film that's genuinely resonated with me in such a way. I think I've seen it like 5 or 6 or 7 times this year now, and each time it genuinely never fails to make me cry. Like, I rarely cry at movies, but I was just taken aback by this one. I was also surprised when, during my first ever watch, everyone in my screening at the cinema genuinely clapped. And this rarely ever happens in British cinemas. I don't think I've ever actually experienced it before. But when someone started clapping, everyone else joined in, and I think we all thought that it was deserved because everyone loved it. Everything Everywhere really just snuck up on me. I remember not being aware of it until like 2 weeks prior to its release. I read that it was by the same directors who created Swiss Army Man, which I love Swiss Army Man. It's a film sold on the premise that the first fart will make you laugh and the last fart will make you cry. It's a pretty brilliant, wacky film, and the Daniels have sort of proved themselves to be among some of the most talented, creative, and just like out there, out of the box thinking filmmaking directors and working in the industry today. Their script is just so incredibly original, hilarious, and heartfelt. The way that it was directed and put together with astonishing creativity and precision, not only to mention on a smaller budget of like 25 million compared to some of the huger blockbusters this year. I was just so impressed and inspired by what they managed to achieve in this film. I was inspired by the implementation of the aspect ratio changes, the match cuts, the practical effects, all done in service of the script and not just for flashy reasons. Like, each thing that was just impressive about the filmmaking was done in service of the script, and that's not always the case. Aside from the just batshit crazy plot, at its core, the film is about the human experience and the sense of being overwhelmed by everything piling on top of you that you can't keep up with, which is especially true for people in this digital era. It can be hard to slow down and take stock when it feels like everything is coming at you at life all at once. I've certainly felt this way sometimes. What I really love also about the core ideas in this film is the battle between optimism and nihilism. We have Joy's character who embodies nihilism. She realises that nothing matters, so what is the point in even trying? Then Waymond, played incredibly by Ke Huy Quan, who hadn't even been in a film for over 20 years, embodies optimism. There is an incredible line from Waymond in the last act of the film that just makes me tear up. It's, "When I choose to see the good side of things, I'm not being naive. It is strategic and necessary. It's how I've learned to survive through everything." This incredible monologue then leads on to Evelyn taking on the final battle as Waymond would, being the optimist even after she learns that nothing matters. I just adore how the Daniels managed to pack such depth into a film that's so crazy and wacky. I just have immense respect for their vision. Without falling into the trap of talking about this film forever and making this video even longer, I've got to end by saying how fantastic Michelle Yeoh is in this film. It was originally written for Jackie Chan, but I'm so glad it ended up the way it did. She's amazing. Like, line delivery, emotional moments, action moments, she's just brilliant. It's worth seeing just for Michelle Yeoh alone, but there's so much more to this film than just her. So that is my top 10 films of 2022. It's been a great year for movies, and some of the films on this list genuinely had a real impact on my life. I'm really looking forward to seeing which movies are the best in 2023, as well as some big releases from some of my favourite directors I'm expecting to sort of hit home. There's probably going to be some films that I, once again, just didn't even see coming. Let me know in the comments below if there are any films in particular that you're really pumped for in 2023, as well as let me know your favourite picks for 2022. Have a great new year.